I never thought my own husband would try to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. But that's exactly what I discovered when I accidentally opened his laptop and found emails between him and my longtime family doctor. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Before we dive into this unbelievable tale, please like and subscribe. I read every comment, so tell me where you're from. My name is Catherine Ross. I'm 47 years old, and I've been married to my husband David for 23 years. We have what I always believed was a solid marriage, built on trust and communication. Or so I thought, until last Tuesday morning, when everything I believed about my life came crashing down around me. It started innocently enough. David had left for his morning jog and forgotten his laptop on the kitchen counter. His email notification kept pinging, and since he was expecting an important work document, I opened it to check if it had arrived. What I found instead were 3 separate email exchanges between David and Dr. Samuel Martinez, my physician of 15 years, discussing my mental state and whether I needed professional intervention in a controlled environment. My hands shook as I read Dr. Martinez's words. David, based on our conversations about Catherine's recent behaviors, I think we should seriously consider the options we discussed. The facility in Riverside has an excellent track record with cases like hers. Cases like mine? What cases? I felt like I was reading about a complete stranger. The first person I called was my daughter, Emma Ross, who's 25 and works as a graphic designer downtown. Emma has always been my closest confidant, the one person in our family who tells it like it is without sugarcoating anything. "Mom, slow down," Emma said when I called her, practically hyperventilating. "What do you mean Dad wants to have you committed? That doesn't make any sense." "Emma, I'm reading the emails right now. Dr. Martinez is talking about controlled environments and professional intervention. They've been discussing this behind my back for weeks, maybe months." "Okay, breathe. What behaviors is he talking about? Have you been feeling different lately? Having any episodes or anything?" I paused, trying to think. "I mean, I've been stressed about Mom's estate since she passed last month. And yes, I've been a little forgetful, maybe more emotional than usual. But Emma, I'm grieving. That's normal, isn't it?" "Of course it's normal, Mom. Grandma's death hit you hard, and handling her estate has been a nightmare. Remember how you had to go through all her papers 3 times because the lawyer kept asking for different documents?" That was true. My mother's death 6 weeks ago had left me devastated, and settling her estate had been incredibly complicated. I'd been staying up late going through decades of paperwork, sometimes forgetting to eat dinner or missing appointments because I was so consumed with getting everything organized. "But Emma, what if David is right? What if I am losing it and I just don't realize it?" "Mom, stop. You're not losing anything. You're dealing with major grief while handling a complex legal situation. Dad should be supporting you, not plotting behind your back with your doctor." After hanging up with Emma, I decided to call my best friend, Janet Morrison. Janet and I have known each other for 12 years, ever since we met at a neighborhood book club. She's a retired nurse, so she has medical experience, and she's also one of the most level-headed people I know. "Catherine, honey, I need you to tell me exactly what these emails said. Word for word, if you can remember," Janet said when I explained the situation. I read her several passages, including one where David wrote, "Janet, Catherine's friend, mentioned that Catherine seemed off during their last coffee date. She said Catherine repeated the same story about her mother's jewelry 3 times in one conversation." "Wait, stop right there," Janet interrupted. "I never said that to David. In fact, I've never had a conversation with David about you at all, except for hello and goodbye when he picks you up from my house." My blood ran cold. "You never talked to David about me seeming off?" Absolutely not. And Catherine, you didn't repeat any story about jewelry. We talked about your mom's jewelry once, when you were deciding what to keep and what to donate. You were completely coherent and logical about the whole thing. So David is lying to Dr. Martinez about what you said? It appears that way. And honestly, this whole thing is giving me chills. In my nursing experience, when family members start building a case for involuntary commitment based on fabricated evidence, it's usually because they have ulterior motives. When David returned from his jog, I was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop still open in front of me. He took one look at my face and knew immediately that I'd discovered his secret. Catherine, I can explain, he said, not even trying to deny what I'd found. Explain what, exactly? Explain how you've been telling my doctor that I'm mentally unstable? Explain how you lied about conversations with Janet that never happened? Or explain why my husband of 23 years thinks I belong in a psychiatric facility? David sat down across from me, and I noticed he wouldn't meet my eyes. You haven't been yourself since your mother died. You're scattered, emotional, forgetful. Last week you put the milk in the pantry and the cereal in the refrigerator. So? I was tired and grieving. That doesn't make me insane, David. And you've been obsessing over your mother's things. You spend hours going through the same boxes over and over again. Sometimes I find you crying in the middle of the night, talking to yourself. I wasn't talking to myself. I was talking to Mom. It's called grief, David. It's what people do when they lose someone they love. But Dr. Martinez thinks what you've told him to think. I stood up, anger replacing the fear I'd felt all morning. You've been feeding him lies and half-truths to build a case against me. Janet never said I seemed off. She told me so herself. For the first time, David looked genuinely surprised. You called Janet? Of course I called Janet, and Emma. Because, unlike you, when I have concerns about someone I love, I talk to people who actually care about that person's well-being. Catherine, I do care about your well-being. That's why I've been talking to Dr. Martinez. I'm worried about you. Worried enough to have me locked away, but not worried enough to actually talk to me about it? David was quiet for a long moment, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Finally, he said, I've been scared, Catherine. You've been so different, and I didn't know how to help you. So, instead of offering help, you decided to eliminate the problem by getting rid of me? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, David? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been systematically building a case to have your grieving wife committed to a mental institution instead of just being patient while she works through the hardest period of her life. The conversation was interrupted when Emma arrived unannounced, using her spare key to let herself in. She took one look at both of us and immediately went to stand behind my chair, putting her hands on my shoulders in a gesture of support. Dad, I need you to explain to me why you think Mom needs to be institutionalized, Emma said, her voice steady but cold. Because I've been thinking about it all morning, and I cannot come up with a single reason why anyone would think she's mentally unstable. David looked uncomfortable having to justify his actions to his daughter. Emma, there have been incidents. What incidents? Be specific. She's been forgetting things, repeating stories, crying at odd hours. Dad, Grandma died 6 weeks ago. Mom is handling her estate, which involves thousands of documents and legal requirements. She's supposed to be emotional right now. She's supposed to be preoccupied. What she's not supposed to be is worried that her own husband is trying to have her committed. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Emma. Having her there, supporting me, made me feel less alone and less crazy. One small detail blew the whole thing open. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly not expecting to have to defend his decisions to Emma. "Sweetheart, you don't see what I see every day. Your mother hasn't been herself since your grandmother died." "Of course she hasn't been herself," Emma shot back. "She lost her mother, but that doesn't make her mentally ill." I watched this exchange between my husband and daughter, feeling both grateful for Emma's support and heartbroken that we were even having this conversation. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. "David," I said slowly, "where's my mother's jewelry box?" He froze. "What jewelry box?" "The antique mahogany box that was on Mom's dresser. The one with all her rings and the pearl necklace Grandpa gave her for their anniversary. I specifically asked you to bring it when you helped me pack up her things last week." "Catherine, I don't remember any jewelry box." Emma looked confused. "Mom, what jewelry box? Grandma kept all her jewelry in that little ceramic dish on her nightstand. She never had a mahogany box." I stared at both of them, my mind reeling. I could see that box as clearly as if it were sitting in front of me. Rich mahogany wood, brass hinges, lined with deep blue velvet. I had admired it countless times as a child when my mother would let me look through her jewelry. "No, that's not right," I insisted. "The ceramic dish was for her everyday things, but the good jewelry was always in the mahogany box?" "Always." David and Emma exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. It was the same look David had been giving Dr. Martinez, I realized. The look that said I was losing my grip on reality. "Catherine," David said gently, "your mother never had a jewelry box like that. I've been to her house hundreds of times over the years. There was never a mahogany jewelry box. But I could remember it so clearly. I could remember sitting on her bed as a little girl, watching her take out the pearl necklace for special occasions. The way the brass hinges creaked slightly when she opened it. The rich, old wood smell that came from inside. Emma came around and knelt beside my chair. "Mom, are you sure you're remembering it right? Sometimes when we're grieving, our memories can get a little mixed up." "I'm not mixed up," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, doubt began creeping in. Why couldn't I remember exactly where the box had been in her room? Why could I see it so clearly but not remember packing it or moving it? David leaned forward. "Catherine, this is exactly what I've been trying to tell Dr. Martinez. You've been having these moments where you remember things that didn't happen, or you forget things that did happen. Last week, you spent an hour looking for your mother's recipe box, insisting she had one even though she never cooked." "She did cook," I protested weakly, but another wave of uncertainty washed over me. Had she cooked? I remembered eating her food, but now that I thought about it, I couldn't picture her actually in the kitchen preparing meals. Emma took my hand. "Mom, it's okay if your memory is a little fuzzy right now. Grief does strange things to our minds. But Dad's right, that some of the things you've been remembering lately don't match what actually happened." I pulled my hand away, frustration and fear battling inside me. "So what? Now you're both ganging up on me? You both think I'm crazy?" "Nobody thinks you're crazy," David said. "But I think you need more help than I know how to give you. Professional help." "From Dr. Martinez, who you've already convinced that I'm mentally unstable?" David was quiet for a moment, then said, "Catherine, Dr. Martinez has never said you're mentally unstable. He's concerned about depression and how grief is affecting your memory and judgment. He thinks some medication and counseling could help." "Then why were you talking about institutionalizing me?" Another silence. Emma looked back and forth between us. "Dad?" Were you really talking about having Mom committed? David ran his hands through his hair. Not committed, Doctor. Martinez mentioned that sometimes people benefit from a short stay somewhere they can rest and get intensive treatment. Just for a few weeks, to help get through the worst of the grief. Without asking me, I said flatly. Because I was afraid you'd refuse, and I was afraid you were getting worse. Emma stood up and began pacing. Okay, this is all getting out of hand. Mom, I think Dad's right that you might benefit from talking to someone about your grief. But Dad, going behind Mom's back to plan her treatment is not okay. I felt like my whole world was shifting beneath me. The jewelry box seemed so real, but their certainty made me doubt myself. And if I was wrong about that, what else might I be wrong about? But then I remembered something else. Something that made my heart race with a different kind of fear entirely. David, I said carefully, if you're so concerned about my well-being, why did you... David, I said carefully, if you're so concerned about my well-being, why did you cancel my therapy appointments with Dr. Richardson 3 weeks ago? The color drained from David's face. Emma stopped pacing and turned to stare at him. What? Emma said. Dad, you didn't tell me Mom was already seeing someone? I didn't cancel anything, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, you did. Dr. Richardson's office called me to confirm the cancellation you made. They said you told them I was switching to a different provider. I felt my confidence returning as I spoke. You told them I would be seeing Dr. Martinez instead. David sat down heavily in his chair. Catherine, you weren't getting better with Dr. Richardson. If anything, you were getting more confused, more upset after every session. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice rising. Those appointments were helping me process Mom's death. Dr. Richardson was helping me understand my grief. Emma looked between us, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. Dad, please tell me you didn't actually cancel Mom's therapy behind her back. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, David spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought Dr. Martinez could help more. He specializes in memory issues. Memory issues, I repeated. So you've already decided what's wrong with me. You've already diagnosed me and arranged my treatment, all without bothering to include me in the conversation. Mom, Emma said gently, why didn't you tell me you were seeing Dr. Richardson? I would have supported that. I turned to look at my daughter, seeing concern but not doubt in her eyes. Because your father convinced me it should stay between us. He said you were already worried enough about me, and that we shouldn't burden you with the details of my treatment. Emma's face hardened as she looked at David. Is that true? David shifted uncomfortably. I thought it was better to handle it privately. You thought it was better to isolate Mom and control her medical care? Emma said, her voice sharp. Dad, this is really serious. You can't just take over someone else's healthcare decisions? I'm her husband, David said defensively. I was trying to protect her. From what? From getting help? I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. Or from getting the wrong kind of help? The kind that might not lead to the conclusion you've already reached? David looked stricken. Catherine, I never meant for it to happen this way. I was scared. You were talking to your mother like she was still alive. You were looking for things that don't exist, and Dr. Richardson seemed to be encouraging you to explore these false memories instead of addressing what was really wrong. What if they're not false memories? Emma said quietly. What if Mom is just grieving in her own way and you're pathologizing normal grief responses? I felt a rush of gratitude toward my daughter. That's exactly what Dr. Richardson was helping me understand. She said that sometimes when we lose someone, our minds try to hold on to them by creating new memories or enhancing old ones. It's not mental illness, it's love. But the jewelry box, David said desperately. Catherine, you spent hours tearing the house apart looking for something that never existed. Maybe it didn't exist, I said slowly. But my need to find it was real. My need to connect with my mother was real. And Dr. Richardson was helping me understand that need, instead of medicating it away. Emma walked over and sat on the arm of my chair. Mom, do you want to go back to Dr. Richardson? I nodded, feeling tears starting to form. Yes, I felt like I was making progress with her. I felt like she understood what I was going through. Then that's what we'll do, Emma said firmly, looking at David. We'll call Dr. Richardson tomorrow and reschedule. And what about Dr. Martinez? David asked. What about him? I replied. If you want to keep meeting with him to discuss your concerns about me, that's your choice. But I won't be attending any more sessions where you and he discuss my mental state like I'm not in the room. David was quiet for a long moment, then said, I owe you both an apology. I thought I was helping, but I see now that I was just trying to control a situation that scared me. Scared you how? Emma asked. David looked directly at me for the first time since this conversation started. I was terrified I was losing you. First I lost your mother, and then I felt like I was watching you slip away too. Every day you seemed more distant, more confused, more unlike the woman I married. I panicked. I felt my anger begin to soften, but I wasn't ready to let go of it entirely. So, you decided the solution was to have me declared mentally incompetent? No, David said quickly. Dr. Martinez never suggested anything like that. He talked about short-term residential treatment, but only if you got worse. And only if you agreed to it. But you were discussing it without me. Yes, David admitted, and that was wrong. Emma stood up and faced both of us. Okay, so here's what I think needs to happen. Mom goes back to Dr. Richardson. Dad, maybe you should talk to someone too, about how to support a spouse through grief without taking control. I think that's a good idea, David said quietly. I looked at my husband, seeing the fear and exhaustion in his face clearly for the first time. David, I know you were trying to help, but I need you to understand that taking away my choices, even with good intentions, made everything worse. I understand that now, he said. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything that had been said settling around us. Then Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her expression changed completely. Mom, she said carefully. This is from Dr. Richardson's office. They're asking if you want to reschedule, but they're also saying there's something urgent they need to discuss with you about your last session. Something you asked them to follow up on. I felt my heart start to race, but this time it wasn't from fear or confusion. What kind of follow-up? Emma read from her phone. They say you asked them to look into some records about your mother. They found something, and they think... She paused, looking between David and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. They think you might have been right about something important. My mouth went dry. 3 weeks ago, during what turned out to be my last session with Dr. Richardson, I had asked her to look into something that had been bothering me for months. A memory that kept surfacing, fragmented and unclear, about my mother's final days in the hospital. What exactly did you ask them to investigate? David asked, his voice gentle but concerned. I took a deep breath, feeling suddenly exposed. I asked Dr. Richardson to request my mother's medical records from the hospital. There was something the nurses said to each other when they thought I wasn't listening. Something about medication levels and timing that didn't make sense to me. Emma's eyes widened. Mom, you never mentioned this before? I wasn't sure if it was real or if my grief was making me imagine things. I said, the words tumbling out faster now. You know how the mind can play tricks when you're under stress. That's part of why I started doubting myself about everything else. David leaned forward in his chair. Catherine, what specifically did you think you heard? The memory came flooding back with startling clarity. One nurse said to another that the morphine drip had been adjusted twice in the night shift, but there was only one notation in the chart. And when I asked about it the next morning, they acted like I had misunderstood. I could see David processing this information, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. And you think this might have affected when she died? Yes, I finished quietly. The timing felt wrong, David. She was lucid that afternoon, talking about coming home, asking about her garden. Then suddenly, she was gone by morning. Emma set her phone down carefully on the coffee table. So, Dr. Richardson looked into it? I asked her to try. I thought if I could understand exactly what happened, maybe I could stop obsessing over it and move forward with my grief properly. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar tension building. But then you switched me to Dr. Martinez, and I never got to follow up. David's face had gone pale. Oh God, Catherine, I interrupted something important, didn't I? When I was so focused on your confusion and memory issues, you were actually trying to solve something real. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. While David had been worried about my mental state and consulting with Dr. Martinez about my supposed decline, I had been methodically investigating something that may have been genuinely wrong. What does the text say exactly? I asked Emma, my heart pounding. Emma picked up her phone and read slowly. Dr. Richardson's office says they received the records you requested and found some discrepancies that warrant further discussion. They want to schedule an appointment as soon as possible to go over their findings with you. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and fear wash over me. For months, I had been second-guessing my own perceptions, wondering if my grief had made me paranoid or delusional. David's concerns about my mental state had only reinforced those doubts. I need to call them back, I said, standing up abruptly. Wait, David said, reaching for my hand. Catherine, I want to go with you to this appointment. Not to monitor you or control the situation, but to support you. If there really was something wrong with your mother's care, you shouldn't have to deal with that alone. I looked down at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. The fear and protectiveness were still there, but something else had changed. He was asking, not deciding. I'd like that, I said, taking his hand. But I need to be the one asking the questions. Of course, he said immediately. Emma cleared her throat. Should I call them back now, or do you want to think about this first? Before I could answer, the house phone rang. We all froze, staring at it as it rang a second time. I'll get it, David said, but I shook my head. No, I will. I walked to the phone, feeling steadier than I had in months. Hello? Mrs. Catherine Walsh? This is Dr. Richardson herself. I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but what we found in your mother's records is quite concerning, and I think we need to discuss it immediately. My heart hammered against my ribs as Dr. Richardson's voice came through the phone. I could feel David and Emma watching me intently from across the room. "What kind of concerns?" I managed to ask, gripping the phone tighter. "The medication dosages in the final weeks don't match what I prescribed. There are also some discrepancies in the nursing notes that I need to discuss with you in person. Mrs. Walsh, I want to be clear that I'm not jumping to any conclusions, but these irregularities warrant investigation." I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Dr. Richardson, my husband has been worried that I'm becoming unstable, that my concerns about my mother's death were signs of mental decline. Are you telling me there might have been legitimate reasons for my suspicions?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mrs. Walsh, your instincts about something being wrong were not unfounded. That's why I need to see you as soon as possible. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "What time?" "How about 9 o'clock? And Mrs. Walsh, you might want to bring someone with you for support. This won't be an easy conversation." After I hung up, the three of us sat in heavy silence. David had moved to sit on the coffee table directly in front of me, his face etched with guilt and concern. "Catherine," he said quietly, "I owe you more than just an apology. I've been so afraid of losing you after watching what happened with my father's dementia that I completely dismissed your legitimate concerns. I made you doubt yourself when you needed support most." Emma leaned forward in her chair. "What exactly were you noticing about your mother's final weeks? The things that made you suspicious?" I took a shaky breath, trying to organize thoughts that had been jumbled by months of self-doubt. She was getting better. Her appetite had improved. She was more alert, even joking with the nurses. Then suddenly she had this rapid decline over just 3 days. The nurse kept saying it was normal, that these things happen quickly, but something felt wrong. "What else?" David asked gently. The medication schedule seemed different. Mom had been on the same routine for weeks, but in those last days, they kept bringing different pills at different times. When I asked about it, they said the doctor had adjusted her doses, but no one could give me specifics. Emma frowned. "Did you ever see Dr. Richardson during those final days?" "That's just it. No. For weeks, she had been checking on Mom every other day. But during that crucial period, she never appeared. The nurses kept saying she was aware of Mom's condition and managing her care remotely. But now I'm wondering if that was true." David ran his hands through his hair. "God, Catherine, while you were trying to process these legitimate concerns, I was meeting with Dr. Martinez about having you committed. I was so convinced that your obsession with these details was unhealthy." "What did you tell Dr. Martinez about me exactly?" I asked. Despite everything, I needed to know how close I had come to losing my freedom. David's face flushed with shame. "I told her you were having memory issues, that you were becoming fixated on conspiracy theories about your mother's death, that you weren't sleeping or eating properly. I painted a picture of someone having a complete mental breakdown. And what did she recommend? She wanted to evaluate you herself first. The institutionalization was presented as a last resort if you became a danger to yourself or others. She never definitively recommended it. That was my fear talking." Emma had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. "David, I need to ask you something directly. When you were so worried about Catherine's mental state, did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, she was right to be concerned? That her instincts as a daughter who knew her mother better than anyone might be worth investigating?" "No," he admitted. I was so focused on the fact that she wasn't grieving the way I expected, wasn't moving forward according to some timeline I had in my head. I thought her inability to accept her mother's death was the problem. I felt a complex mixture of anger and sympathy toward my husband. "David," You nearly had me committed because I wouldn't grieve on your schedule. I know, and I will spend however long it takes making this right. He looked directly at me. But right now, what matters is that appointment tomorrow. What do you need from me? The question surprised me. For months, David had been telling me what I needed, what was best for me, what I should do. This was the first time in a long while that he had simply asked. I need you to listen tomorrow, not to manage the situation or protect me from difficult information, but to actually hear what Dr. Richardson has to say. And I need you to trust that I can handle whatever we learn. I can do that. Emma stood up and began pacing slowly around the living room. There's something else we should consider. If there really were irregularities in your mother's care, this could be bigger than just one incident. There might be other families who went through something similar. The thought sent a chill through me. You think this could have happened to other patients? I don't know, but medical negligence or worse rarely happens in isolation. If someone was altering medication dosages or falsifying records, your mother might not have been the only victim. David looked stricken. Catherine, if that's true, then not only did I fail to support you when you needed it most, I actively tried to silence you when you might have been uncovering something that could help other families. I reached for his hand, surprising myself. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the fear and the months of self-doubt he had caused, I could see his genuine remorse. We can't change what's already happened, but we can make sure we handle tomorrow right. What if Dr. Richardson confirms that something criminal happened to your mother? Emma asked quietly. Are you prepared for that possibility? The question hung in the air like a weight. I had spent so long just trying to trust my own perceptions that I hadn't fully considered the implications if those perceptions turned out to be correct. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know I can't spend the rest of my life wondering. Whatever happened to Mom, she deserves the truth. And if there are other families out there who lost someone under suspicious circumstances, they deserve answers too. Emma nodded. Then we go tomorrow, and we listen to everything Dr. Richardson has to tell us. We? David asked. Yes, we. Catherine asked me to help her figure this out months ago, and I'm not abandoning her now just because it's getting complicated. As we sat there, planning for the morning, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time since my mother's death, I wasn't questioning my own sanity or wondering if my concerns were valid. The relief of that alone was overwhelming. But as I looked at David's guilty face and thought about Dr. Richardson's serious tone, I also realized we might be on the brink of discovering something that would change everything. Tomorrow's appointment wouldn't just be about getting answers. It might be about learning that my mother's death was not the peaceful passing we had been told it was. The phone rang again, jarring all three of us back to the present moment. I grabbed the phone before it could ring again, my heart still racing from the intensity of our conversation. Hello? Catherine? It's me again. Dr. Richardson's voice was even more strained than before. I'm sorry to call back so late, but I've been thinking about our conversation, and there's something else you need to know before tomorrow. David and Emma both leaned closer, trying to hear. I put the phone on speaker. What is it, Dr. Richardson? I've been going through more of the records tonight, and I found something that concerns me deeply. Your mother's chart shows that she was prescribed a new medication 3 days before she died. A sedative that wasn't part of her regular treatment plan. My blood ran cold. What kind of sedative? That's what worries me. It's not something we would typically prescribe for someone in her condition. In fact, given her other medications, it could have been dangerous. But here's the thing, Catherine. I don't remember prescribing it, and my signature on the order looks different. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. David had gone completely pale. Are you saying someone forged your signature? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying that either my memory is failing me completely, or someone authorized medication in my name without my knowledge. And if that's the case, then your mother may have been given something that contributed to her death. The room felt like it was spinning. After months of questioning my own perceptions, here was a medical professional confirming that something wasn't right. Dr. Richardson, who else would have had access to prescribed medication under your name? There was a long pause. Catherine, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you could have serious implications, not just for your family, but potentially for my career and this entire facility. Just tell me, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. Dr. Harris, he's been covering some of my cases when I'm not available. He would have had access to prescription pads, and he knew your mother's case well. But Catherine, I need to be clear. I'm not making accusations. I'm just telling you who had the opportunity. Dr. Harris, the name hit me like a physical blow. He was the doctor who had been so dismissive of my concerns after Mom died. The one who had assured me that everything had been done properly, that her death was simply the natural progression of her illness. Oh my God, Emma whispered. Catherine, wasn't he the one who… Yes. I cut her off, my mind racing. He was the one who told me I was being emotional and irrational when I asked questions about her final days. David looked sick. Catherine, I remember him. He's the one who suggested you might benefit from counseling when you kept asking about the medication changes. The pieces were starting to fall into place in a way that made my stomach churn. Dr. Harris hadn't just dismissed my concerns. He had actively tried to make me doubt myself. And David, in his misguided attempt to help me, had played right into it. Dr. Richardson, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. When we meet tomorrow, what exactly are you planning to show me? Everything. Your mother's complete medical records, the prescription orders, the dosage logs. I want you to see exactly what happened in those final days. And Catherine, if my suspicions are correct, we may need to contact the medical board, possibly even law enforcement. After we hung up, the three of us sat in stunned silence. The magnitude of what we had just learned was almost too much to process. Catherine, David said finally, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry. Not just for doubting you, but for actively working against you when you were trying to uncover the truth about your mother's death. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw genuine anguish in his eyes. David, you thought you were protecting me. No, that's not good enough, he said, shaking his head. I should have listened to you. I should have supported your questions instead of trying to silence them. Your instincts were right, and I dismissed them because they made me uncomfortable. Emma had been unusually quiet during this exchange. Finally, she spoke up. What happens if Dr. Richardson is right? If someone really did alter your mother's medication without proper authorization? The question hung heavy between us. I thought about my mother's final days. How confused and agitated she had seemed. How different from her usual gentle demeanor. I had attributed it to her illness progressing, but what if it had been something else entirely? Then my mother may have died because someone made a decision about her care without proper authority, I said quietly. And that someone has spent the last few months trying to make me think I was losing my mind for questioning it. We don't know that for certain yet, David said carefully. No, we don't. But think about it, David. Every time I raised concerns, Dr. Harris was there to shut them down. He was the one who suggested I might be having difficulty accepting Mom's death. He was the one who planted the seeds that made you think I needed psychiatric help. The realization was hitting all of us simultaneously. If Dr. Richardson's suspicions were correct, then Dr. Harris hadn't just made a medical error. He had engaged in an elaborate cover-up that had nearly destroyed my marriage and my sense of reality. What do we do now? Emma asked. We go to that appointment tomorrow, I said with more conviction than I had felt in months. We look at everything Dr. Richardson has to show us, and then we decide what comes next. Together, David added. Whatever we find out, we handle it together. I nodded, but part of me was already preparing for the possibility that tomorrow's revelations would be just the beginning. If my mother had been a victim of medical malpractice or worse, then the real fight was just starting. As we finally prepared to go to bed, none of us acknowledged the obvious question that was hanging over everything. If Dr. Harris was willing to alter medications and cover up the consequences, what else might he be capable of? And more importantly, what would he do if he found out we were getting close to the truth? That night, sleep eluded me completely. I lay in bed next to David, listening to his steady breathing and marveling at how he could find rest when my mind was racing with possibilities I had never dared to consider before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face during those final weeks, not peaceful or resigned as I had tried to convince myself, but frightened and confused in a way that had haunted me. I kept replaying conversations with Dr. Harris, searching for signs I had missed, his dismissive tone when I questioned the medication changes, the way he had redirected every concern back to my emotional state rather than addressing the medical facts, how quickly he had suggested that my persistent questions indicated an unhealthy fixation. The worst part was realizing how effectively his approach had worked. He had planted doubt about my own perception so skillfully that I had begun to question everything I thought I knew. When David started echoing those same concerns about my mental state, it had felt like confirmation of what Dr. Harris had suggested all along. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made my way to the kitchen. Emma was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, still in her pajamas. Couldn't sleep either? She asked without looking up. My brain won't shut off. I poured myself some water and sat across from her. Emma, what if Dr. Richardson is wrong? What if I'm about to drag all of us through something terrible based on another doctor's suspicions? She studied my face in the dim light from the stove hood. Do you think he's wrong? I don't know what to think anymore. For months, I've been told that my concerns weren't valid, that I was processing grief in an unhealthy way. What if that's actually true? What if I'm so desperate to find someone to blame for Mom's death that I'm willing to believe anything? You're not that kind of person, Emma said firmly. I've known you your entire adult life. You don't make accusations lightly. You don't create drama where none exists. When you started asking questions about your mother's care, it was because something felt wrong to you. But feeling like something is wrong isn't the same as something actually being wrong. No, it's not. But your feelings deserve to be taken seriously, not dismissed. Even if Dr. Richardson's concerns turn out to be unfounded, that doesn't mean you were crazy for having questions in the first place. I wrapped my hands around my water glass, needing something solid to anchor me. I keep thinking about how Dr. Harris made me feel. Like I was being difficult. Like a good daughter would have accepted his explanations and moved on. A good daughter asks questions when something doesn't feel right about her mother's care. David didn't think so. Emma was quiet for a moment. David was scared. When someone you love starts questioning everything and seems distressed all the time, it's natural to want to fix it. Dr. Harris gave him a way to understand what was happening and a solution that felt manageable. Getting me psychiatric help felt manageable? More manageable than the possibility that your mother's doctor made a serious error? Yes. Think about it. If David accepted that your concerns were valid, then he would have had to accept that the medical system failed your mother. That's a much scarier reality than believing your grief needed professional guidance. I had never considered it from that angle before. So, he wasn't just trying to silence me. He was trying to protect himself from a truth he didn't want to face. Maybe both. People are complicated. We can have multiple motivations for the same action, even when they contradict each other. David appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled and squinting in the low light. I heard voices. Is everything okay? Neither of us could sleep, I said. We were talking about tomorrow. He sat down beside me, reaching for my hand. I can't sleep either. I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell me something felt wrong, and I shut you down. I'm so sorry. We've established that apologies aren't enough, I said, but I didn't pull my hand away. The question is what we do differently going forward. We listen to each other, he said. Really listen. And we don't let outside voices convince us to doubt what we know about each other. Emma stood up and rinsed her cup in the sink. I'm going to try to get a few more hours of sleep before that appointment, but for what it's worth, I think you're both stronger than you realize. Whatever we find out tomorrow, you'll handle it. After she left, David and I sat in the quiet kitchen. The weight of everything unsaid hung between us. What are you most afraid of? I asked him. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. I'm afraid that if Dr. Richardson is right, it means I failed you twice. Once by not believing you, and again by almost letting Dr. Harris convince me to have you committed for being right. The word committed hit me like a physical blow. In all our discussions about psychiatric evaluation and treatment, neither of us had used such a stark term. Is that what you were planning? To have me committed? I don't know. Maybe. Dr. Harris made it sound like the most loving thing I could do. He said that sometimes people can't see clearly enough to get the help they need, and that family members have to make difficult decisions. I felt something cold settle in my chest. David, that's exactly what someone would say if they were trying to discredit a person who was getting too close to the truth. We looked at each other across the table, and I could see the same realization dawning in his eyes that was crystallizing in my mind. If Dr. Harris had made a serious error in my mother's care, then having me declared mentally unstable would have been the perfect way to ensure that any accusations I made would be dismissed. Tomorrow can't come soon enough, I said, but even as I said it, a new fear was taking root. If we were right about Dr. Harris's motivations, then our meeting with Dr. Richardson tomorrow would make us a threat. And I had no idea what someone who was willing to alter medications and manipulate family members might do when cornered. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I'd managed maybe 2 hours of actual sleep, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling and running through worst-case scenarios. David wasn't much better. I could feel him tossing and turning beside me until dawn. Emma was already dressed and making coffee when we came downstairs. She'd clearly been awake for a while, her laptop open on the kitchen table with what looked like research pulled up on the screen. I've been thinking about what you said last night, she said without preamble. About Dr. Harris trying to discredit you if he made an error with your mother's care. I did some reading about medical malpractice cases, and there's actually a pattern of this kind of behavior when doctors feel threatened. David poured himself coffee with shaking hands. What kind of pattern? Attacking the credibility of anyone who might expose them. Sometimes it's subtle, questioning a family member's emotional state, suggesting they're not thinking clearly due to grief. Other times, it's more aggressive. Emma looked directly at me. Like convincing a spouse that their partner needs psychiatric intervention. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. How often does this happen? More than you'd think, especially when families start asking questions about medication changes or treatment decisions that don't make sense in hindsight. David sat down heavily in his chair. God, I feel like such an idiot. How did I not see it? Because you trusted him, I said, surprised to find myself defending him. Because when someone in a position of authority tells you that your wife is having a breakdown, your instinct is to believe them and try to help. But I should have believed you first. Emma closed her laptop. The important thing is what we do now. Are you both still committed to this meeting with Dr. Richardson? I nodded immediately, but noticed David hesitate for just a moment before agreeing. That tiny pause made my stomach clench. David? No, yes, absolutely. I'm just worried about what happens if we're right. If Dr. Harris really did make a mistake with your mother's medication, and he's been trying to cover it up by making you look unstable. Then we deal with it, I said firmly. Whatever the consequences are. But what if he tries to retaliate? What if he escalates things? Emma leaned forward. What do you mean, escalates? I don't know. More pressure to have Sarah hospitalized? Could he try to have her involuntarily committed based on his evaluation? The room went dead silent. I felt ice water run through my veins as I realized David was right to be worried. Dr. Harris had already laid groundwork with David, painting me as delusional and unstable. If we confronted him with evidence that contradicted his cover story, what would stop him from pushing harder? Can he do that? I asked Emma. Legally, I mean? It's complicated. Usually there has to be evidence of immediate danger to yourself or others. But if he convinced David to support the commitment, and if his documentation painted a concerning enough picture. She didn't need to finish. We all understood. So, what are you saying? David asked. That we just let it go? That we pretend none of this happened? I'm saying we need to be smart about how we handle the meeting with Dr. Richardson. We need to document everything, and we need to make sure other people know what we're doing. What other people? I asked. Who else can we trust with this? Emma was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through options. Finally, she said, Let's focus on getting through today first. But Sarah, I think you should consider having someone else present during the meeting. A witness. Like who? Like me. If Dr. Richardson is willing to meet with all of us, it might be harder for anyone to later claim you seemed unstable or made unreasonable demands. David reached across the table and took my hand. I'll be there too. Whatever we find out, whatever happens next, I'm not letting anyone question your credibility again. His words should have been comforting, but something cold was still churning in my stomach. What if we're wrong, though? What if I really have been losing it, and Dr. Richardson confirms that my mother's medication was appropriate? Then we deal with that too, Emma said. But Sarah, even if that's the case, it doesn't excuse Dr. Harris going behind your back to convince David you needed to be institutionalized. That was manipulative and unethical, regardless of whether your concerns about your mother's care were justified. The phone rang, making all three of us jump. David got up to answer it, and I could see the tension in his shoulders as he said hello. Yes, this is David Morrison. What? When? His voice changed, becoming sharp and worried. Are you sure? Okay, yes, we'll be right there. He hung up and turned to face us, his complexion pale. That was Dr. Richardson's office. She's had to move our appointment up. She wants to see us in an hour, and she specifically asked that we bring any documentation we have about your mother's care. Why the rush? Emma asked. David's jaw tightened. Because Dr. Harris called her office this morning. He told them we might be coming in with some concerning accusations, and that I was worried about Sarah's mental state. He suggested that Dr. Richardson should be prepared to do an emergency psychiatric evaluation. The room spun around me. Somehow, Dr. Harris had figured out what we were planning, and he was already moving to discredit me before we could even present our case. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank back into my chair, feeling the room tilt around me. He knows. Somehow, he figured out what we were doing. How is that possible? Emma demanded, her voice sharp with anger. We haven't told anyone. We've been careful. David ran his hands through his hair, pacing now between the kitchen counter and the table. I don't know. Maybe he called to follow up on our conversation yesterday and got suspicious when I didn't sound as cooperative as before. What exactly did you say to him? I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice but failing. Nothing that should have tipped him off. I just said I needed more time to think about everything. David stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Sarah, I swear to you, I didn't say anything about Dr. Richardson or about us questioning his diagnosis. Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is exactly what I was worried about. He's trying to control the narrative before we can even tell our side. But why would he go to such lengths? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. If he genuinely believes I need help, wouldn't he want me to get a second opinion? Unless he knows his recommendation wasn't based on solid medical judgment, Emma said grimly. Think about it, Sarah. If a doctor is confident in their diagnosis, they welcome second opinions. They don't try to sabotage them. David sat back down heavily, reaching for my hand again. The question is, what do we do now? Do we still go to the appointment knowing he's already poisoned the well? We have to, I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. If we don't show up, it looks like we're running from something. And if I don't show up, it makes his claims about my mental state seem more credible. Emma nodded approvingly. You're right, but we need to be even more strategic now. David, when you go in there, you need to be very clear about your role in this. What do you mean? I mean, you need to make it crystal clear that you're not there seeking psychiatric evaluation for your wife. You need to explain that you were manipulated into believing she needed institutionalization, and now you have questions about the doctor who recommended it. David looked uncomfortable. But what if Dr. Richardson thinks I'm just flip-flopping? What if she decides I'm the unreliable one? Then that's better than having her think Sarah is unstable. Emma shot back. David, you were the one who was convinced to consider having your wife committed. If anyone's judgment should be questioned here, it should be yours, not hers. The harshness in Emma's voice made David flinch, and I could see hurt flash across his face. Emma, that's not fair. He was very convincing, and I was scared for Sarah. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know you did, Emma said, her tone softening slightly. But that's exactly what we need Dr. Richardson to understand. You were a frightened husband who got manipulated by a medical professional you trusted. That makes you a victim too, not an accomplice. I watched this exchange feeling strangely detached, as if I were observing someone else's life. What if none of this matters? What if Dr. Richardson has already made up her mind based on whatever Dr. Harris told her? Then we make sure there's a record of what really happened, Emma said. We document everything. We ask direct questions, and we don't let anyone deflect or minimize our concerns. David pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm going to write down exactly what I remember from my conversations with Dr. Harris. Every detail, every suggestion he made, every way he convinced me that institutionalization was the right choice. That's good, Emma said. And Sarah, you should write down everything you remember about your interactions with him, too. Every time he dismissed your concerns, every time he seemed more interested in your husband's perspective than yours. I felt a chill run down my spine as I remembered something. He asked me once if I thought David would be better off without having to worry about me all the time. At the time, I thought he was just exploring how my condition was affecting our marriage. But now it sounds like he was planting seeds, Emma finished. Making you feel like a burden so you'd be more receptive to the idea of getting intensive help. David looked up from his phone, his face pale. He said something similar to me. He talked about how exhausting it must be to constantly worry about your mental state, and how sometimes the kindest thing was to make sure you got professional care, even if you didn't think you needed it. The manipulation was becoming clearer with every memory we shared, but somehow that made me feel worse, not better. So we were both being played, but that still doesn't answer the biggest question. Which is? Emma asked. Why? What does Dr. Harris gain from having me institutionalized? It's not like he runs the facility or would make money from my treatment. What's his motivation? The room fell silent as we all contemplated this question. Finally, David spoke up. Maybe we'll find out at Dr. Richardson's office. But first, we need to figure out how to walk into that appointment without falling into whatever trap he's trying to set. Emma checked her watch. We have 45 minutes. Let's use them wisely. But as we sat there trying to prepare for what felt like a battle for my sanity and freedom, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Harris was already 3 steps ahead of us, and we were walking straight into something much bigger and more dangerous than we realized. The drive to Dr. Richardson's office felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. David gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, while Emma sat in the back seat reviewing the notes we'd hastily compiled. Remember, Emma said as we pulled into the parking lot, you don't have to agree to anything today. This is supposed to be an evaluation, not a commitment ceremony. I nodded, though my stomach was churning. What if she's already made up her mind based on whatever Dr. Harris told her? Then we make it clear that there are things she doesn't know, David said, turning off the engine. We tell her about the secret meetings, about how he manipulated both of us. The waiting room was sterile and quiet, filled with the kind of furniture that was meant to be calming, but somehow made everything feel more ominous. When Dr. Richardson finally called us back, I was surprised to see that she was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Sarah, David, please come in, she said warmly. I understand Dr. Harris has referred you for a consultation regarding some treatment options. We settled into chairs across from her desk, and I noticed David's leg bouncing nervously. Dr. Richardson opened a file and glanced at it briefly before looking up at us. Before we begin, I want you to know that anything we discuss today is completely confidential. And Sarah, you are in complete control of any decisions about your care. Dr. Harris has provided some background, but I'd like to hear directly from you about what's been going on. I took a deep breath. Dr. Richardson, before we talk about my mental health, I need to tell you something about Dr. Harris that you might not know. Her eyebrows raised slightly. Go ahead. He's been meeting with my husband secretly, behind my back, without my knowledge or consent, discussing having me committed to a psychiatric facility. Dr. Richardson's expression shifted, becoming more focused and serious. She looked between David and me. "Can you tell me more about these meetings?" David leaned forward. "I initiated them, but now I realize I was being manipulated. Dr. Harris convinced me that Sarah was more unstable than she actually is, and that institutionalization was the only way to help her. He made me feel like I was failing as a husband if I didn't take this step." "And you weren't aware of these conversations, Sarah?" "Not until yesterday. I found out completely by accident." I felt my voice getting stronger as I spoke. "Dr. Harris has been treating me for anxiety and depression. But instead of working with me directly on treatment options, he's been working around me, convincing my husband that I'm not capable of making decisions about my own care." Dr. Richardson closed the file and leaned back in her chair. "This is very concerning. Medical ethics require that competent adults be the primary decision-makers in their own treatment. Can you tell me what specific recommendations Dr. Harris made regarding institutionalization?" David pulled out his phone where he'd been taking notes. "He suggested a facility called Riverside Mental Health Center. He said Sarah needed intensive residential treatment for at least 6 months, possibly longer. He told me that her resistance to the idea was actually proof that she needed it." "Did he provide you with a specific diagnosis that would warrant this level of intervention?" I shook my head. "That's just it. My symptoms are manageable. I've been dealing with some anxiety and mild depression following a job loss, but I'm functional. I take care of myself. I maintain relationships. I'm looking for work. Nothing about my condition suggests I need to be institutionalized." Dr. Richardson made some notes on a legal pad. "Sarah, I'd like to do a brief assessment today, with your permission." "Not because I'm questioning your competency, but because I want to have a complete picture of your mental state for my records." "Of course." The next hour involved a series of questions and simple tests that felt more like a conversation than a clinical evaluation. Dr. Richardson asked about my daily routines, my relationships, my coping strategies, and my goals. She had David step out for part of it so I could speak freely. When we were all back together, Dr. Richardson's verdict was clear. "Based on everything I've observed and assessed today, I see absolutely no indication that Sarah requires institutional care. Her symptoms are well within the range of what can be effectively treated with outpatient therapy and possibly medication adjustment." I felt like I could breathe for the first time in days. "Furthermore," she continued, "the approach Dr. Harris took raises serious ethical concerns. Patients have the right to be informed about their treatment recommendations, and competent adults should never have major treatment decisions made behind their backs." David looked stricken. "I feel like such an idiot. I thought I was helping her." Dr. Richardson's voice was gentle but firm. "You were manipulated by someone in a position of authority. But going forward, any decisions about Sarah's care need to be made with her full knowledge and consent." "So, what do we do about Dr. Harris?" I asked. I'm required to report these ethical violations to the medical board," she said. "But for now, I'd recommend you find a new primary care physician and consider whether you'd like to pursue therapy with someone else." As we left the office, I felt lighter than I had in months, but there was still something bothering me. "I still don't understand why he did it," I said to David and Emma as we sat in the car. "What did he gain from trying to have me committed?" David started the engine thoughtfully. "Maybe some people just get too caught up in playing God. Maybe he genuinely thought he knew better than both of us what was right for our marriage." Emma shook her head from the back seat. "Or maybe he's done this before, to other patients. Maybe this is a pattern." The thought was chilling, But it also made me realize something important. Whatever his reasons were, the most important thing is that we figured it out. We communicated, we asked questions, and we didn't let someone else make decisions about my life without my input. David reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have talked to you from the beginning. You were scared and you were trying to help. I understand that now. But going forward, we handle everything together, okay? No more secret meetings, no more making decisions about each other behind our backs. Deal, he said firmly. Emma leaned forward between our seats. You know what this whole experience taught me? Sometimes the people we're supposed to trust most are the ones we need to question most carefully. Doctors, therapists, even family members. They're all human, and humans make mistakes or have their own agendas. As we drove home, I realized that while the last few days had been terrifying, they'd also been illuminating. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that my marriage could survive serious communication breakdowns, and that having someone like Emma in my corner was invaluable. If you're going through something similar, if someone in your life is making major decisions about you without your input, or if you feel like medical professionals aren't listening to your concerns, trust your instincts. Ask questions, demand transparency, and don't let anyone convince you that you're not capable of being involved in decisions about your own life. Your voice matters, your perspective is valid, and you have the right to be heard.